President Donald Trump has invited the presidents of Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania and Senegal to the White House on the 9th of July for what Washington describes as a commercial opportunity. The first such mini summit of his second term. The meeting lands just weeks before the African Growth and Opportunity Act is due for renewal, and against a backdrop of intensifying great power competition on the continent. Well, to explore the political calculus behind the guest list and what Africa should expect, we're now joined live by Kwezi Mngqibisa, who's a political analyst and researcher. Kwezi, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Good morning, Peter, and thank you for having me.
All right, so do we have any idea why these 5 countries in particular, and why now?
Well, the reality of the matter is that President Trump has positioned himself as one to actually effect a meaningful break of American relations with Africa that are defined by dependence or aid, to be explicit. The expiry of AGOA presents him with an opportunity to reset relations and actually pivot towards commercial transactional deals. So this is going to be, I imagine this to be the first test of how that pivot could be defined in terms of parameters, in terms of substance. The choice of the guest list itself is very curious for some of us, because he actually has gone for countries that are not necessarily known as regional hegemons or regional economies, which basically means that they could be a test case on how to target specific sectors, but at the same time, how to actually plant seeds of regional engagement by actually looking into these countries on the West Coast, where there are oil and natural gas resources.
So, what we've seen from Donald Trump to date is that anything he does is mostly transactional. You've mentioned oil in some states. Is there anything else that he could get out of these countries? Because he does describe it as commercial opportunity talks.
Yes, there's a lot that he can get beyond just simply deals, Peter. I think more than anything else, the U.S. administration and President Trump as a personality is interested in actually effecting a measure of erasing the expectations of the continent and the developing world to indeed benefit from the largesse of the U.S. economy, which remains a big factor in the economic livelihoods of people in the developing South. The fact that many of our countries in Africa have depended upon U.S. aid or United States or foreign direct aid, as it were, means that he actually wants he wants us as Africans and our government to get it out of our system, that there is ever going to be a reconsideration of that position by his administration. So when he talks about exploring commercial opportunities, remember, unlike many of our countries on the continent, if not all, the United States has got a very strong private sector component, which is very influential in making demands of it and to create the conditions for expansion of their operations where opportunities exist. So I think this is an opportunity for President Trump to actually make sure that he consolidates the hold and the interaction, the lockstep, as they call it, between the administration as well as the private sector in targeting specific sectors in Africa where opportunities may exist.
Is there a danger for African countries when they get invited separately like this? I think it's one thing when one country goes, but a small group like this, that the U.S. administration is wanting to deal separately with Africa rather than to see it as a bloc, and that Africa needs to be careful because AGOA is a Pan-African thing, and sending or inviting a few countries at a time, the complete or total African message might get diluted.
We are wrong, Peter, you and I, in continuing to talk about Pan-African initiatives when we're dealing with the United States, which is quite clear it's America first. The reality of the matter is that we have never consolidated a meaningful strategy as Africans in order to pursue that Pan-African vision of trade, Pan-African vision of engaging with the rest of the world. What is the reality of the matter here is that we need to be actually convening as Africans to actually say, what does it mean to deal with a global superpower that is transactional? We have not done that. So once more, we're still going to fall into the trap of being reactive. I'm not going to refuse to go to the United States of America if I'm Guinea-Bissau or I'm Liberia, when most of my natural resources are already leveraged to American firms for 99-year leases for the exploration and export of rubber. So that Africa, once more, has continued to be grand, to be big on a grand vision, but very poor or shown poverty in terms of stratagem on how to deal with a world that might not be in lockstep with the things that we want to achieve for ourselves.
Do you think the summit primarily is aimed at blunting China's growing and surging 12% year-on-year trade growth with Africa, or Donald Trump just doesn't care about China? He's more worried about just the U.S. and what the U.S. can get out of things?
I would like us to imagine President Trump as the one politician who is heading an administration of a major country, economically, militarily in the world. Anything that he does, he says, is intended to, one, put America first. Now, this could be in bilateral relationships with small or big countries around the world, including in Africa. But secondly, it is indeed, Peter, to posture and create an alternative to China and Russia's economic, military, security engagements on the continent. You know, since the announcement of this particular summit, China has already made serious moves in something similar. They have not abandoned their Belt and Silk Road initiative. But they've actually, what they've done is they've actually looked at now securing agreements with individual African countries in particular sectors, including lithium and such like. There is competition for Africa. I'm not sure if Africa is ready to contend with it.
Might we see more of these kinds of mini summits instead of one big, huge one, which Biden was pushing for many years, as part of the way Trump deals with Africa?
Indeed, we will, Peter. Just last week, the U.S. Director of African Affairs was in Angola, met with a number of our commercial and trade officials on the continent. He was very adamant and clear of the fact that the United States is developing a new framework of commercial trade engagement with the continent at an individual and at a bilateral level. This is the reality that we are living with right now. And it does not mean that Africa can still not push a collective position by actually coming together in order to see how we can communicate a common message and explore mutually beneficial, Africa beneficial positions in those agreements with the United States.
Kwezi, always great talking to you. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you. Have a great day, Peter.
Great. Same to you, my brother. That's Kwezi Mngqibisa, who's a political analyst and researcher, talking to us about this trip by Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal to the White House on the 9th of July, a mini summit called Commercial Opportunity Talks with the United States. We'll keep on top of that story for you. Right now, it's 7:30 Central Africa time, which means it's time for your news.